Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation. I'm Lily, a PhD student from Department of Mechanical Engineering at the University of Memphis. Today I will introduce a diffusion charging model of arbitrary shaped aerosol particles, which has been validated by comparisons with the published experimental data. Diffusion charging is the process of charging the particles through ion diffusion, which is independent to external electric field. The animation on the right side showed the ion trajectory in blue line. Ions' motion is due to their thermal energy and electrostatic potential energy. Charges are transferred to particle once there is a collision between ion and particle. The collision rate, which would be called charging rate, is estimated as the product of collision kernel beta, particle concentration, and ion concentration. Collision kernel plays a vital role in determining the particle charge distribution. In this study, we focus on the theoretical description of data for diffusion charging. In the developed collision kernel expression, the effect of attractive Coulomb and image potential interaction between ion and particle are parameterized by the Coulomb potential energy to thermal energy ratio psi E and image potential energy to thermal energy ratio psi I. Psi I depends on material dielectric constant, epsilon r. However, we consider only perfectly conducting particles where epsilon r is infinite. But our analysis may be extended to non-conducting particles as well. And the scaling of thermal energy uses a diffusive Newton number KND. Is the ratio of the ion mean persistent path to a well-defined particle length scale. Then normalizing collision kernel beta with ion relaxation time as a reference time scale. Beta yields a non-dimensional form collision kernel H. In earlier study, limiting functional forms of H are given for continuum limit and free molecular limit. But transition regime collision kernel is more complicated, and that's what we focus on. Earlier this year, we described a Lagrange dynamic-based collision kernel model, including Coulombic and image potential interactions for spherical particles. Here in this study, we extend this existing model to non-spherical shapes. For a spherical particle, the line scale used to normalize the ion mean persistent path is naturally the radius. For non-spherical particles, continuum transport is described using small Chomsky radius Rx, defined as the radius of the sphere with the same diffusion limited transport rate as the non-spherical. On the other hand, the free molecular transport of ions is described using gas kinetic theory invoking the orientation average projective area PA of the particle. The geometric parameters Rs and PA can be evaluated using efficient algorithms for any given shape. PA and Rs for selected shapes are shown in the table on the right side. In this slide, the calculations of non-dimensional collision kernel H for different test shapes are plotted as a function of the diffusive Newton number KND at psi E equal to 60, with psi I psi E ratio to be 0 to 1 shown in panels A, C, and E, illustrate the effect of image potential. In panels A, C, and E, the color field symbols describe the numerically computed H. Each symbol denotes different test shapes. The continuum limit and free molecular limit of H is shown using a red black dashed line with equations shown. A model calculated H is shown using the dark black dashed line. The lower panels B, D, and F show respectively the difference between the numerically computed kernel and analytically computed kernel. Reference lines at 10 and 20% are included. At low and high Newton number, the model computed collision kernel approaches the continuum and free molecular limits. It's also seen that extended model describes H within plus-minus 20% in most cases. In total, this collision kernel model may be used to calculate the beta required to have complete charge distribution. The following slides we will discuss the comparisons with experiments and assess the accuracy of model. We firstly test the model for fractal aggregate shape, singly, doubly, and triply charged fraction of flame-generated aggregates measured by Marek in 2008 are used to validate our model. Panel A and Panel E show singly charged fraction of particles with different fractal dimensions, and the case of sphere particle is shown in Panel I. Data sets of positive polarity are shown in red field triangles for experimental data and red dashed line for model predictions. Negative polarity data are shown in blue field triangles for experimental data and blue dashed lines for model predictions. Similarly, panel B, F, and J for doubly charged fraction and panel C, G, and K show triply charged fraction of both positive and negative polarities described by color field squares for experimental data and color dashed line for model predictions. The predictions of the charge fractions follow the experimental trend closely and differ by ±20%, as can be seen from panel D and panel H, for fractal dimensions to be 2 and 1.9 respectively. It's also seen that shapes that are low non-spherical do not differ significantly from mobility equivalent spheres, according to model predictions, and this is confirmed by similar fractal reported by Marek's experimental data. The next slide shows the comparisons of chain-like shaped particles. The bipolar charge distribution of straight-chain iron oxide particles measured by Wen in 1984 is presented as particle mean charge as a function of the DMA classification voltage. For easily getting a length scale, we consider straight-chain aggregates as a cylinder shape. The predictions are made taking into account the convolution between the charge distribution and the DMA transfer functions for the experimental conditions. The experimental data is shown using black field circles, and the model predictions are shown using the gray field histogram in panels A, C, and E, respectively for primary particles diameter of 41, 51, and 59 nanometer. It's seen that for instances in which the DMA classification voltage larger than 2 kV, the difference percentage is between ±20% for most instances, indicating the excellent agreement for lower charge states. For DMA voltage smaller than 3 kV nominally, the particles exiting the DMA are dominated by highly mobile species or highly charged particles. In these instances, the difference percentage is around 30 to 40%, but no higher overall. In total, this figure will indicate the ability of the Langevin dynamic-based collision kernel to predict the charge distribution of nearly straight-chain particles. In conclusion, this extended kernel model for collisions between ion and non-spherical particles is validated by comparing against published experimental data of bipolar charge distributions for diverse shapes. For fractal aggregates, beta model predicts within ±30% overall without any systematic bias. The mean charge predicted by our model on linear chain aggregates is in good agreement with the measurements within overall ±20%. And the remaining question is the effect of particle materials on collision kernel model. In our case, particles are assumed to be perfectly conducting. The analysis needs to be extended to non-conducting particles in the future work. At the end, I want to thank ASF Grant and the University of Memphis HPC for supporting this work. This work has been accepted in Journal of Aerosol Science for publication. I'd like to share the accepted manuscript and provide subroutines of the kernel model if you want to use it. Please feel free to contact me via the email. By the way, I'm in the last year of my PhD looking for a postdoc position. I'll be available to talk in job seeker session tomorrow evening. Thank you all for listening. I'm glad to answer any questions.